Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and as you can see here, we have a bunch of Bauer Vapor gloves, specifically the Flylite and the Flypro, which is the new naming convention. So instead of having 2X Pro, Hyperlite, and the old good ones, which were basically APX2 Pro and APX2, and then 1X Pro, and then 1X. They now have Flylite and Flypro. So I'm going to do a comparison review between these two to show off the differences and to see if Bauer has finally made a top-end glove worthy of anywhere close to the prices that they are charging, which is $219 for this one and $290 for these now in Canada, which blows my mind. But we're gonna compare those. People who have seen my channel before probably know my criticisms of Bauer for gloves, and we're gonna see if these are any better. CCM has really dropped the ball with their newest glove. We'll also do the 3D hand test to check out how long they fit compared to other gloves, so we have a standardized idea with that, and we'll go over kind of the features and stuff in here and take a look at it. First of all, I'm going to talk about this every single Flylite piece of gear, because why wouldn't I? Bauer already used the Flylite naming. They've done this in the past before, where they had basically a 1S and then another 1S, and they added a year at the end of it. They didn't really do Flylite Protective at the time. They skipped that. I really don't know why they're doing Flylite. It's pretty confusing when they already had it. Now you had Flylite, Hyperlite, Hyperlite 2, Flylite. It's super annoying, but Bauer's just doing Bauer things. Flypro, at least you kind of slightly understand the naming behind it, so now you don't have to find out if a 3X after was the price point one, what one that lines up with, so at least that's okay in that sense. The reason I want to grab these Flypros and put them next to the Flylites is because I've actually had people tell me that Bauer reps and people at Bauer tell them that the Flypro, well, it was the 3X, are the actual gloves that pros are wearing, and I'm gonna jump into that right now. If that's the case, I feel really sorry for pros who are wearing Bauer gloves currently, so they're just missing out on so much what was on their previous gloves. Like these 1X Pros, these were the light ones. So this didn't even have plastic in the backhand padding, but a lot of them had plastic shot blocker pieces, but the fingers still had plastic inserts on top of it. So it was still beefy in that sense, but not back here. This doesn't have a plastic insert, but it's crazy strong and crazy thick and is pretty solid, and like the foam in it is so dense that it's kind of okay, and there's no gaps right here, so there's no spandex back here to actually pull this back, so this works really well. Now this is a Line A glove, so if you have a different 1X Pro Lite, it might be slightly different, but this was still really solid, had the full pour on package with a really dense foam, and then the plastic insert, which I've shown off over and over again. We're not gonna jump into that. This is not like that at all. So I really feel sorry for those pros that are stuck with these gloves, because that's all they really know of for Bauer, and you should just wear CCM or Warrior's doing better. True's doing way better now for pros. That pour on is gone. It's a soft foam behind it with a thicker density foam on top, which is fine, but that thicker density foam is thinner than what was on the previous ones for Pro Stock. Maybe the Pro Stock ones of these are slightly different, but then they're lying to those people who say that these are the same specs as what the pros have. And then you have plastic inserts up here, which is fine, plastic inserts up here. And if that is the case, Bauer has really lost the plot on Pro Stock gloves. These used to be the best, and the retail ones like this was so close to the Pro Stock ones. They're easy recommendations, and Bauer has totally lost that in recent years, and I've kind of documented that over and over again. And one of the reasons why I wanted to grab both of these to take a look at. Check out the links in the description as well as the pinned comment to Aycane. Click that link and use the coupon code and you'll get a discount, which helps support the channel. It gives me a kickback so I can keep making more content and doing more videos. So you're buying hockey stuff, in this case base layers or clothing, and it helps support the channel so I keep making more purchases and doing more reviews. And if you want to support the channel without buying hockey specific things or these base layers, you can always support the channel through Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon. Everything through any of those links always comes back into the channel and it is greatly appreciated. And with that, we will actually jump into the comparison on these two really quickly to see where you are going to get differences for the pricing and everything like that. On the backhand here, you have 3 pieces. This is super game breaking, and Bauer is really pushing the envelope here with 3-piece backhands. Used to get 4 rolls, and now they're doing 3 rolls. And yes, I am being very sarcastic because this glove is like a decade old and is a vapor glove and has 4 rolls. Why did you get rid of more and more rolls? On the Flylite on here, you have 2 behind here, which are just a single density foam, which is really soft, because you have this plate, which isn't a plastic, it is just a molded foam on top. And then you have that 1 piece down here as well. So you still do have the 3 pieces, but it kind of shows only as 2 on top of here. For the index fingers and the overall finger breaks, you have the exact same going on. So 3 index finger and 2 piece everywhere else. You do have a difference on the thumbs. On the Flypro, you have a 2 piece, which does this. can see that right here. And on the Flylite, you have a 3-piece, which does that. So you can see how that upper piece ends up bending with your thumb a bit. And it does feel like the whole glove ends up moving more with this one because this whole thumb comes with you, where this is just the tip. So when you really put these on and you go like this, the 3-piece does end up flexing more for you. And speaking of this 3-piece thumb, Bauer removed this on the previous gen Hyperlites. They went to a 2-piece thumb. So I guess it's a nice thing that Bauer brought back the design that has been on their decade-old gloves. So it's a nice thing that they did that. Why did they get rid of it in the first place and then add it back? Recently, most of their top gloves have just been this 2-piece design. So I guess they brought it back for the Flylite. So maybe there's pricing difference. You have 3. But again, this is a design that has existed for a while for Bauer now. Again, this is like a decade-old glove, and even older ones than this had it. And Bauer took it away in terms of talking that you don't need it anymore. But really, let's be real, they're cheapening out. And now they're at least adding it back. Keeping on to the fingers and thumb area, the side piece, you can see it's obviously broken up into 2. But all these pieces over here are very similar in terms of overall design between them. You do have a slightly bigger piece on the Flylite because this plate doesn't quite come all the way across. So these overlap a bit more on the Flylite than they do on the Flypro. Side index finger pieces are basically the same through here and same construction. These used to have plastic inserts, they no longer do. Looking on the outside, exact same idea and design on here. You have a plastic insert on this piece, you have a plastic insert on that piece, and you do have a plastic insert right here. When we look at the Flypro, same thing. Feels like a very similar material on that. Looking at your palms, you have your Pro Palm. The whole actual pressing of this is all double done. To show that off, you can see how you can actually read Pro Palm there, and how this one, it's barely there. That's a small thing. Yes, that's a manufacturing thing and a QC thing, but it's really not that bad of a thing and doesn't make a huge difference versus the Dur Connect Palm, which has 2 different materials, well, colors at least through it. Now, I will say, feeling these next to each other, the Dur Connect is much softer and feels a little bit nicer to the touch. This one feels more like a Pro Stock palm. It kind of does feel like AX suede, but it's very soft, where this one just feels like a Nash. It is very nice still, but the Flylite palm does feel nicer. And it also, when you're doing this, it also has less, you can see kind of the breaks in this. You can feel those less in the palm itself. So it feels pretty solid in that sense. Onto the undercuff, you have this kind of interesting new design on both of these. I actually really like this design on all the Flylite stuff. It means really nothing, but I think it actually looks pretty good. And the different colors on the palm also look really good. So kind of interesting it's there. It doesn't make any difference. Both of these do not have plastic inserts under here, which were a thing of the past. This glove has plastic inserts, and this one as well has plastic inserts on the undercuff. Now, while we're over here, this whole piece is designed in a similar way, but you can see the Flylites have their DCT advertising on there, which is their pretty interesting foam, which is almost like Pour-On. I was pretty impressed with this in the goalie stuff on the Hyperlite 2 gear because you did really notice it on a bunch of pieces. So the fact that it's in here and it does feel like it is the base on here isn't that bad, and I'll talk about that more when we go over the protection pieces on this. The liners are their Thermomax Core Zero and Thermomax Plus. I can't say anything on these whatsoever. Again, Bauer used to have a thing where they would pay $37.5. They got away from trying to use licensed products and materials more and more. Also, the Pour-On was a licensed foam, so they're doing their own thing, and that is what the Thermocore is. I haven't had problems with Bauer liners in the past. They all felt pretty comfortable and pretty good, so no issues for me there. When you pull the inner liners out, you can see you have pretty different materials on here between the two. Now, the other thing that is different on here, this is really thin with a thin piece of foam through it, nothing crazy going on. This actually feels like it has a little bit of DCT in it. So squeezing this, it feels like it is a smart foam, which is an amazing return to form a little bit for Bauer. And I love to see this because when you actually take these ones out, this was a big chunk of Pour-On and this was fantastic on the backhand. It was excellent protection behind the already solid foam package. So having this back there was very good and amazing. So the fact that even though this is much thinner and softer, it still does feel like it is that more expensive foam. So maybe this is DCT. I didn't check marketing for this, but you can see it's a bit squishy and it kind of comes back into its shape. So I love that Bauer has actually done that. Huge credit to them for that. Now going on to the cuff and the logos, you have a pretty similar idea between them. This one is obviously not the blacked out graphics, which this one is, but you have kind of this textured 3D plastic logo, which is a disappointing thing, but Bauer has been doing this for a while now. Previously, the lower tier models used to be actually like Pro Stock ones, where it was basically sewn on like this. It's not anymore. It's disappointing. This is cheaper. It's also lighter. We've seen CCM do this as well. The outer cuff density as well feels pretty similar to one another. So you do have a pretty thin foam right here. It does obviously get thicker throughout it. So back here it is thicker, but there isn't a really super dense foam on here, and you can fold these pretty good, but nothing like that CCM glove, which folded in half. So it's definitely better than that. But it does have maybe multiple densities, because it does have a lot thicker one right in here. And you can see it's a bit more squishy as well, but no plastics and not crazy density like on other ones. On the Flylite, it feels like this part is more foldable, but when you really kind of try to flex this, it doesn't really feel like it's that different from the Flypro. Doing this feels pretty similar with it. There's definitely no plastic or really dense foams through it. The difference is these like don't fold at all. You can see these fold a lot worse in terms of like you can't fold it that way, and this foam is so much more dense on the Pro Stocks. The retail one wasn't that dense compared to Pro Stocks on this older one, but it was still thicker and more dense than what is on the new ones. Not the end of the world and not the worst thing. Now there is a bit of a gap still for protection behind this. You can see that is spandex gusset on here to allow for stretch like that, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It is on both of these, so you will have that gap in protection as well, which we saw was really bad on the CCM FT. So I'll do a quick test on this one as well to see how those perform. Now, when we get onto the top piece up here, you do have a pretty different piece between these as well. These cuffs also feel very different to each other, and the Flypro feels thicker than the Flylite, but they're actually the same. I pulled out the caliper to take a look. This feels like it's a dual density foam, top layer right here, softer layer behind it. And you can see how hard and thick this is. This is pretty good overall and pretty beefy. So when you do get hit up here, you have a pretty decent amount of padding on there. Now for this one up here, same thing. The foams do feel slightly different though. This one doesn't feel as dense, so you can do this easier than versus on this one. At least it feels like that to me. And when you squeeze them, they do feel like the Flylite is a little bit less dense on the top of this. Maybe that's not the case, but they do feel ever so slightly different. But you can see the materials on them are ever so slightly different as well. So maybe that's playing into it. Both are pretty solid thickness and pretty decent overall. Previously on these gloves though, this was a plastic insert in there, so you had a bunch of protection in there, and that was on the retail one as well with a plastic insert. So they removed that, but that's been gone for a while. It's not the end of the world. On to the rest of the cuff. This part on the Flylite is much nicer, to be honest. So while this piece right here is like a nice molded foam, and on the Flypro, it's just the same kind of material as what is on the rest of them. This is just kind of a nice touch and has been on the top end Bauer ones for a while now. I like that. Not the end of the world, doesn't make a huge difference, but it is there. And then when you get on the rest of the cuff, it is the same. I really like how these logos are kind of textured, so you can see how the color is actually like embossed into the actual part right there. Kind of the same on the Flypro. Kind of interesting detail, and I don't hate that, since that is the only actual branding on this, which I'm guessing they're doing for Pro Stock. I'm not really sure, because usually they used to have a big X on the side where you knew what it was, as you can kind of see right here. Having it up here is an interesting choice, so I'm curious to see how that will look at the NHL and the pro level. You are also getting a slightly lighter weight glove with the Flylite compared to the Flypro, because there is less plastics in it. Now, I can't weigh these because I actually did get different sizes, so this is a 14 and the Flypro is a 15. So obviously the difference between these is not all that much. You have this basically back piece, the palms, and some slight other differences on there. But the big part is the foam package, with this being the DCT everywhere. For that DCT, it does feel like it is on the bottom part of here, because when you squeeze this, it does feel like those pour-on packages or the D3O package, where it slowly kind of comes back and it doesn't feel like just kind of a normal foam. So you have that at the bottom, and then the top part is a much more dense foam. So you can squeeze that, barely goes anywhere. So that will be mostly impact protection, and then you have the softening and dampening below. Now, I can't tell if this is a plastic insert or not. This is not connected to the top piece, so you can kind of see it sliding out here, where previously these ones were connected to the top piece and they were just a part of the molded foam. Now, Bauer doesn't say this is plastic. They call it their 3-shock foam piece. and it kind of feels like it has a point. So like when you hit it to the side, it feels kind of sharp. So I think this might be a plastic or something, but the thing is you can fold it back pretty easily, as you can see there, which is something that is not super easy to do on the Pro Stocks, where I'll try to do this one and it doesn't do nearly as much. And this is what the plastic was on some previous Pro Stocks, and you can see it doesn't really fold all that much compared to what does on the Flylite ones. And when we look at the Flypro one, which does have that plastic insert, it doesn't really feel like it folds as much as these ones do, but it's so close to being there. And this material kind of feels like plastic, so I got to give Bauer credit for that, because this is definitely the move in the right direction. Instead of just doing that molded piece on the top, it actually does have kind of that insert, which is more like that Pro Stock glove and the plastic piece. Now, when you look onto the backhand piece right here, there is none of that insert. It is just all a piece of molded foam. Now it does have, it feels like that DCT underneath this, and then the harder foam on top, but that is just the foam. And then underneath this is all just that DCT, as you can see. So it has that shell going through there. And then when we get on the sides, it does feel like it has that insert there and right there, but not on the sides right there and not right here. But it's pretty standard and not terrible, and much better than what it was before. So Bauer deserves some credit here for going back to what they had previously. When we look at the Flypro, it definitely doesn't have that DCT at the bottom. This bottom foam on here feels very mediocre, to be honest. It doesn't feel that great. It feels worse than like the Zote foam in the CCM gloves. Has that dense top piece, and then it does have that plastic insert on top. So this is a pretty close Pro Stock foam package, but I think this DCT is better than what this foam is. So it's really frustrating you can't get this level or even the old retail level on there anymore, because this was really good with that pour on and then that's harder foam material on top and then that plastic insert. This is almost there, but it's not there, and it is disappointing in that sense. You do have plastic inserts on here, and you do have that softer foam, more dense foam, and then that plastic insert. That's going to be all the way through here. Very similar in terms of padding on this. Plastic inserts here, and then nothing over there. So very similar for that. Now, one spot that is really bad is right here, has no plastic insert. As you can see, you can just totally squish this, and it's not hard at all. So if this is a dual layer, which I believe it is for foam, it is just too soft and just gets squished in. It's obviously slightly covered by this, but even this one, because it does have that shield, it's much better for that. Disappointing gap right here. Cuff should help a little bit, but it's not great. And you want to support the channel, and you need a base layer and a protective, kind of supportive base layer that helps protect your growing as well as your hips. Check out the Cortec. This is the Pro 1.0 pant, so this one is not quite as restrictive, and this is kind of tight right here in this X pattern. You might have seen these as Under Armour before, or Bauer for the hockey specific ones. There's also the Core 3.0, which is a lot stiffer, as you can see. Really helps protect my growing and keeping it kind of in place and make sure it doesn't overstretch itself. There's a discount code, and you click the link in the description. Use that discount code to get a discount off, help support myself, as well as get you some pretty awesome base layer pants that really do help with injury prevention and help stabilize your core while playing. So now we'll grab this stick and do a quick test on it. So one thing on here, you can see too, the fingers are kind of slanted. So sticks do kind of fit right in there pretty nicely, unfortunately. So that is not a nice thing, because that can go in there, and especially if you get like a tip up, because if you're holding your stick like this and someone comes in and goes like this, that can get right in there. So this design, I get the purpose of these being kind of slanted like this. They've been like that for what feels like a while on retail gloves, but the Pro Stocks didn't quite have that. This is obviously kind of opening a really nice kind of shape on here, and just to prove it, when your fingers are like that, you can see it's perfectly open. Slant it the other way maybe on one of them to just block it off, or have these segmented a bit so they're not the same length everywhere. That way this would make a difference, or just put a 3-piece right here or right here like your Supreme gloves had, and that way that would get blocked by that gap, because as you can see, that can get in there, which is not good. For the finger test on here, overall it's pretty good and not the worst. I've definitely felt worse, and that's not that bad at all. So this is decent and better than what it was before. The plate is going to be fine on here, and then the cuff is the big questionable part. That's not good at all. And then this one's always bad too, which is also not good. And that is because of how soft this foam is back here, with the gap back here as well. Overall, it's not terrible, but when we compare it to this one, which is kind of that Pro Stock one, well, they say Pro Stock one, you can see the finger gaps, same thing. The fingers on this one do feel a bit better, and I think that is that plastic insert being a bit better on that. It's totally fine. That backhand pad is going to be fine, plastic. Then we're going to do it right up here just for that test. So that is so bad. That is going right through here and right into here because there's not enough there. On the cuff roll, again, not great and not good at all. And that is that cuff roll, which is kind of the poor piece of these gloves. And I have been so critical of Bauer in the past. You can see my reviews of them going backwards, and me telling Bauer to go back to what these were, and to go back what these were, and to go back to what these were, and make these gloves that were excellent options and basically class leading, industry leading. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Fix this up. Put the real thicker plastic inserts in here, which is going to add weight, which they don't want to do for this line. Or at least just put DCT in here and make the Flypro the top line because it's the Pro line, and then make that the beefier, heavier one. And then you can sell the sticks, the Flypros, be like, oh yeah, these are the pro sticks for the beefier ones, because not all the pros want the top and lightest. They want some heavier ones, which is sometimes true. And then you could just put all the best foams from here into here, and you would have a winning glove if you beefed up this cuff. This is really close, so I'm not that disappointed with the protection on here, which for me is saying a lot. Mobility and dexterity on both of these gloves is pretty solid. For the Flypro, you can see when you close your fingers, the back doesn't really do all that much. You really have to like end up breaking this in, and you'll get that break separating. But the back piece, you can see with this little part that helps with the protection gap on here is the difference on here. But you can see how this part over here doesn't really fold all that much. It's not awful, and it's good enough, and it works as you'd expect a 3-roll to kind of work. You can touch the pinky to thumb relatively easy. It's fine. You can do it. It's not the best thing ever. When you do that, you can see that break a little bit, but that break really doesn't do anything when you go down. So kind of acts as like a traditional 4-roll-ish design like there, just because it's not quite cut in the best way to actually move with your hands. It could be a little lower, and the fingers could kind of be cut a little bit more to allow more of a break and to fill in that gap a bit more. For the top cuff part, you can see how this is sloped upwards, so it will slide over the cuff like this when reaching back. This is a pretty big cuff as well. So when you do end up going like this, especially with some elbow pads, it's going to push up and it will allow it to float that way. The undercuff is totally fine. Nothing crazy on here. It is 2 connection pieces here and here, and it does fold out, and it does work pretty okay for that. And you can also see this does kind of have a flex cuff design, but it barely does anything. So you can barely see any movement there, but it's slightly coming down here because of that spandex underneath. But overall dexterity is pretty good on this. When we look at the Flypro, because of that 3-piece thumb, it is easier to go to pinky to that thumb, but you can see the same thing kind of happening with these breaks. There is 2 under here, but really acts as 1 piece. And then this part right here ends up moving a bit more with my hands, but there is still that gap. And again, if this was down a little bit more, you would have less of a gap, and this would end up breaking with your hands more because it would be right there. So you end up getting just as good protection on the backhand, but filling this in a little bit better, so it would be a bit nicer. You really have to put your hand really deep in there with my fingers nowhere near it to close it to really get that to fold over. Breaking this in will help with this a bit, but you can see that that really doesn't do anything with the way that is designed. But overall, this feels pretty mobile, especially with this 3-piece thumb. This ends up actually doing a bit, and it's pretty easy to touch the thumb and pinky finger, and it is a bit better than what was on the Flypro. The cuff on here is a little bit different because you do lose some of that kind of slope, and you do have a cut out for the cuff, and you can see when it slides, it does roll over there totally fine though, just because this plate feels like it's a little lower than what the foam protection package is on the sides right here, as well as what is on the Flypro. But everything on the cuff over here is pretty much the same and acts the same way. So it's totally fine. And again, have a bit of a flex cuff, but barely does anything just because this isn't super tight and really pulling the cuff down with you. So we're going to look at the Flylite for the 3D grip test. So we have our excellent Bauer 3D texture grip. Now this is an interesting glove in terms of how the DuraConnect is. When you put it right here, the overlay doesn't actually touch the stick all that much, and you get a lot on this piece right up here. So when you do it on that top piece, you can really feel that texture through there. When you do it on just the DuraConnect, you can't feel that texture, which is standard for a double layer palm, which this is. It's honestly like pretty close. Like this, you can almost feel it. Like, you just notice it's not totally smooth, but right here you can feel all those textured pieces. It's fantastic. Putting your fingers onto the actual stick like this, the fingers, you can obviously feel it. And then the thumb, you can even feel it, even though it does have that double layer. It obviously doesn't come through as nice on the fingers because the fingers are a single layer and up here, but it feels really nice. And when you're kind of holding the stick like this, like you would, you do end up feeling a lot of it with this part of your fingers, which interestingly enough is not double layered here, and it feels fantastic. I kind of like this DuraConnect. It feels pretty great on here, and the grip is pretty solid as well, pretty standard Bauer stuff, but I'm surprised at how thin this palm feels. I'm curious about durability, but you can see how it is still that double layer on there, and you can see where the thumb and the fingers are connected with that bigger stitch line through it. But this feels fantastic on a stick, so I gotta give him a ton of credit for that. That feels really good, and probably one of the best retail gloves I have used. And when you compare kind of the sizing of where your fingers are on here, this is so much more exposed. Even with the CCM, when I put this on, like, this doesn't really feel through the actual grip because this part is like right there. Bauer moved it down a bunch, and it really does feel like this DuraConnect layer ends up coming so much lower that you can really feel it more on your finger pieces right here, which ends up being right here on your hand. And when we look at the Flypro, it is a slightly different material, but we put it on here, same thing. So you really can't feel that double layer on the palm itself, but once you actually put it on to this layer right here and the fingers, it feels excellent. And the thumb does have enough feeling to it, but it feels less so than what is on the Flylite. So that, I can tell it's not flat, but it's not quite as good. Fingers on this though is excellent. Grip is pretty good overall, pretty standard for like a Nash type glove, but fingers and top of the palm here are really good, where their overlay for the Pro Palm isn't the best, but again, standard retail. The gussets on both of these are stretch spandex gussets. So you can see right here, they come through. Super for comfort, and that's kind of stock on retail, unfortunately. Not Nash tips like it should be, so this really is a really low spec pro stock glove. If someone actually ordered something like this, you want that Nash tips, it's much better. But this is pretty standard, and they're very comfortable with that spandex on there. So we're going to do the 3D hand test, and this is going to be the Flypro first, just because it is the 15-inch, and it doesn't really work for this hand test because everything else we are comparing is 14s. But again, I wanted to grab a slightly different one just because this one would generally be my preference of glove. And if we're looking at the Flylite versus the Flypro, they fit the same, so no real big loss there. So once we get the palms in, we have the 15-inch hand on the right and the 14 on the left, and you can see how that's just gone. You can barely see it. So when we look at the 15, you can see the tips are not past the edges at all, and they're still in there, so you do have a bit of room, so it's not blowing out of it. And we look at the 14, and you have a ton of space here. Like, that's a lot on there, and there's a lot, and this palm can even come out a bit because it's probably squished in there. So then you have really a lot of room. So these being 15-inch gloves are fitting the 3D hand test like I expect. They are fitting just as a normal 15 does for Bauer, CCM, stuff like that. And it would be very comparable to the Jet Speed in terms of overall length. And Bauer doesn't really have longer gloves for pro stocks. Their 14s fit like 14s. So solid with that, and totally expected. And now we will do the Flylite one. So we put the 15-inch in the right, and we're going to put the 14 in the left. And as we can see, smaller one on the left, bigger on the right. When we look at the 15-inch hand, you can see the tips are coming out at the ends right here and right here. Totally as expected for this glove. And for the 14-inch hand, it is pretty much where you'd want it, not coming out there, very close to the end there, and close to the end there. So these fit totally as standard for a 14-inch glove, especially Bauer, which have fit pretty similar for years now. So when I put these gloves on with my fingers, you can see them coming past here. So obviously this is a too small of an overall size for my hands, which is totally understandable because it's a 14 and generally I wear 15s. Now, when I put both of these gloves on, so I put the 15 on my left, 14 on the right, and you look at overall kind of fit profile on them, they are tapered, and some companies have weird tapered part, basically kind of snug on the fingers, and they bloom out and get open pretty like loose on the top. So this glove on the 14 feels pretty tight to me and feels pretty solid in my preference, but it's a smaller glove. So if I shake these off, obviously the 15-inch glove is coming off easier and quicker than the 14 would, but you can see it does come off overall pretty easily. And if I take that 14 and compare it against the CCM Jet Speed 14, You can see the Vapor is looser overall than what the Jet Speed is because this is more aligned with the Tacks in terms of overall fit profile. So it's a bit looser on that. So finally, and the least important thing is weight. And yes, this glove is lightweight. When I put this next to the Jet Speed, which one feels lighter? Maybe the Bauer, but not by a lot. It honestly feels like maybe a few pieces of tape. Now, when I put the Flylite next to this 1X Lite, which one is lighter? It's the Flylite, but this isn't a heavy glove and doesn't feel heavy and is much more protective. It's not going to make the world of a difference on here. And it's really so close that it's not a big deal. Again, stop chasing weights. Bauer is all about weights for this glove. They say it's the lightest glove, but they also say they add protection, which I think they did. And I can't believe I'm saying this. Bauer has actually slightly impressed me with a glove. Now, that isn't me saying this is actually a really good glove and you should buy this, especially for basically $300. One, just buy pro stock gloves. But I am a bigger fan of what Warrior has been doing. They have been like improving every time. CCM was doing solid things until the FT8 Pro, which was terrible, and True has been doing solid things as well. But this is a step in the right direction, in the correct direction, and it's hilarious how Bauer talks about the new 3-piece thumb design when really you had a 3-piece design forever. Overall, these gloves aren't bad. They're okay. They're too expensive for what they are, but they're definitely a move in the right direction. This still isn't the heyday of what Bauer was at retail like these. It still has a bit of a way to go to get there. I hope they do that. They really just should put the plastic inserts back into this thing and make it just that much better and then beef up the cuff, and it would be pretty good overall. I would also love to see Nash fingertips, but I understand that retail people don't really care about Nash fingertips and don't like it, and the spandex will feel more comfortable, so they'll end up choosing that over the actual better glove choice, which is Nash fingertips and what the pros are choosing. It's frustrating, but I get it from a retail standpoint because that's what the world is and that's how retail works. Thank you very much for watching this video. If this video was helpful and you happen to buy a piece of Bauer gear because of it, please let them know on social media that Hockey Reviews review was helpful. Me giving any sort of praise is a lot to these gloves because I've been calling them out for years now, so it's nice to see them change in the right direction. But if you want me to review a specific piece of gear, like a stick or shoulder pad, stuff like that, let the companies know on social media. Let me know in the comments as well, but let the companies know on social media that you want to see Hockey Reviews review their equipment. Hopefully lets them know me doing content like this is helpful and does make a difference. Thank you very much for watching this video. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Links are in the description. If you want to support the channel and you're buying hockey equipment anyways, you can click the links in the description. In Canada, to Just Hockey. In the US, to Pure Hockey. Clicking those links, making a purchase gives me a kickback, helps support channel so I can keep making more content and doing more real on ice reviews. Otherwise, if you want to support the channel without buying anything hockey specifically, you can check out the links in the description to Patreon and buy me a coffee. Anything through any of those links always comes back into my channel so I can keep making more content and doing more reviews. Thank you very much for watching and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.